Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Cleveland-based jazz saxophonist, producer, and bandleader Matthew Alec. Along with his music roles, he is the founder and executive producer at Cleveland Time Records, along with being the bandleader for the high-energy jazz fusion group Matthew Alec and the Soul Electric. Nominated as Cleveland's best horn player by the Cleveland Scene magazine in 2009, he has performed for over 20 years. He holds a bachelor's degree in music from Kent State University. This is a great cat. Enjoy this interview.
Joe Domino, Neon Jazz. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking a minute. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Before we get into anything here, new recordings, kind of what's going on in your life right now. Talk to me a little bit as a jazz musician. How did you survive COVID, and how have you subsequently changed the way that you live your life and approach your jazz craft now that we're coming out of it?
That's a good question. So I'm fortunate that I have some other income. So I was able to survive, but to say that, the first album that I put out came out right at the beginning of the pandemic, which was not stellar and completely derailed any chances for any type of touring. I survived by recording. I kind of shifted focus, and I started really putting a lot of effort and time into putting out video content, stuff like that. I also took on a number of students, so I was doing stuff like that, which now 2 years in the future, I think actually helped quite a bit, because as a result of everything that I've done, and I've got a huge YouTube channel and a lot of stuff going on, and the touring prospects are starting to open up again. So I said all that. Does any of that make any sense?
Yeah, no, that was crystal clear. No, that's what I was going for, and I'm curious, coming from my end of the microphone, I did see a lot of releases that even over the pandemic were coming out, and I will never ever forget those releases that came out right before and right during it. They'll always have a special time for me,
sure,
because they just represent the idea that music never stops, and that the artist is always going to create, and I think there's a level of triumph that goes into that. And I'm curious now, at this time, do you have a recording that's brimming, that's coming out? What are you kind of doing now that live shows? Yeah,
so I did a live performance with Tom Bones Malone from the Blues Brothers and Saturday Night Live. He was on Saturday Night Live for a few years. Are you familiar with him?
The name is familiar, yes. And I'm sure I know his work,
Yeah, indeed. He is, his resume is absolutely ridiculous. But I got to be friends with him through Facebook. And I started talking to him via email, and I sent him a recording of the original album. Cleveland Time was the studio album that I put out. And I had sent him some of the half-finished tracks, and I asked him if he would be interested in recording on it. I'm in Cleveland. He lived in New Jersey. He actually moved out to California recently. But and he really liked it, and he said that he would. And so he recorded, digitally at his home studio for the actual studio album. And then I started talking to him and like, hey, why don't you come to Cleveland? Why don't you do a live performance with my group, and we'll do a big event in downtown Cleveland. And he was all about it, and he actually flew out, it's getting close to a year ago now. It was actually February earlier this year, and I had a live album made from that performance. So it, fast forward several months in the future, we've got all the mixing, mastering, videos made for it. I had a video crew tape the whole thing, and that is coming out on December 2nd. So that I'm kind of looking forward to. It's totally different than the last album. The last album was more of like a funk and traditional jazz-driven release. This is material that really pays homage to him. We picked some more of the like soul jazz standard stuff, and some of the Blues Brothers tunes that he knows extremely well. So it's a little bit different, but I have to say I really like it. There's a lot of good energy on the album.
So talk to me. Are you originally from Cleveland?
Yeah. I was born and raised in Richfield, Ohio, which is like it's about 30 minutes south of Cleveland. And I actually live in Akron right now, but obviously I'm in Cleveland quite a bit. So, but yeah, I've never left.
Cool. Well, the one thing I want to get to, I always thought that Kansas City had sports heartbreak.
Yeah.
And every year when I watch Cleveland, I'm like, man, they got to get a break. I mean, beyond LeBron and that year that they had the run, like I'm pulling for the Guardians. I'm pulling for the Browns. Like, there's a part of me that's just like, man, you guys need to have a celebration like no other. Because,
well, I appreciate you saying that. It is pretty tough to watch. I've pretty much just given up on the Browns at this point. So.
Yeah, and I would think after Deshaun Watson, after everything that was a part of that whole thing, I just kept thinking, what if, like, I had no idea what happened with Baker. Anyway, we could get into a rabbit hole here, but I just want you to know, as someone from a town that's gone through some pain and finally has a quarterback and a team that's reliable. I mean, the Chiefs, people have a pretty short-term memory. We went through years that were unreal as a sports fan here. So anyway, I'm pulling for you guys, but
well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I know Mahomes is a good quarterback at this point, so I think you guys are set, at least for now.
Yeah, exactly. All that contract runs out or something happens,
sure.
We're in good shape. But I'm curious with you, how did these seeds of jazz begin for you? What was your childhood like, and why is it that jazz resonated with you to become who you are today?
Oh, wow. Okay, good question. So, I did an interview for this other magazine about a month ago, and I kind of spelled it out to them. It's funny when I go back and I think about it, because music was not an integral part of my childhood. I loved music, but I didn't really know anything about it. So as like a little kid, I kind of wish, I had an exceptionally musical family, but I didn't. I mean, my mother and my brother were amateur musicians at one point in their lives, but it wasn't, it wasn't something that I was immersed in or anything like that. It didn't really happen for me until high school. So, like in high school, I had been playing the saxophone for a few years. Started in the fifth grade, I think. My school district started, and I wasn't very good, and I didn't care very much about it, to be honest. The joke that I had was that the saxophone sat in its case in the locker pretty much most days. It wasn't really touched. But so in high school, I'm not sure what the impetus was. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I started to get into classic rock. I really liked classic rock. I liked the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and all that, and I wanted to play the guitar. I wanted to play the guitar really badly, and that didn't wind up happening. Actually, what happened was there was this freshman student who came up who was really good, and he played alto saxophone, and he was a big Charlie Parker fan, and I got to be really good friends with him. And as a result, he hit me to all that music. And I started listening to Charlie Parker, and then John Coltrane, and Duke Ellington. And sure enough, fast forward a couple of years, I go to Kent State, and I'm like, you know what? I should go in for music. So everything kind of changed for me over the course of about 3 years. That's kind of how it happened.
I just had an epiphany when you were explaining that. There's so many musicians that tell me I really ran into jazz later on in life. And jazz reminds me metaphorically of like an alcoholic beverage. It's like I just didn't start drinking until later in life. And then once I got in there, it was the beverage that I loved. It made me feel good. So I was thinking about that. But that's the allure of jazz. Once you get it and you're hooked in, and maybe it's good that it's later in life. But it's not bad that if you're young, because you really kind of get lured into it. But I think there's a level of appreciation the older you are where you've listened to a lot of music, your parents' music, pop culture, radio. And then you get to that point where it's like, all right, I have all of these choices. I'm in the front of the condiment aisle, and I know what condiment I want on my sandwich now. I know what I want. I'm more refined.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. True of me for alcohol, too. How about that?
That's right. So a good beer and a hoagie sandwich, and we're in.
Sure, absolutely.
So, the one thing that's very key about the development of our music brains is concerts. What was the first jazz show you saw that blew you away?
Oh, boy. It was not the first one I saw, but I can tell you one that will always stand out in my memory, and I was young enough, so I think it counts. But in 2000, I want to say one, I was probably a junior in high school, something like that. I went with my mother to New York City, and we saw Herbie Hancock, Michael Brecker, and Riff Hargrove at Carnegie Hall in the Directions in Music tour that they did during those years.
Wow.
And then afterwards, I got to meet all three of them, and they signed the CD that they had put out from that tour. They signed the front of it, and I think that counts. And it wasn't true at the time. My tastes were just starting. I was just starting to develop. But fast forward about 15 years, Michael Brecker was absolutely my favorite saxophone player, and still is. So. Kind of funny that it kind of worked out that way, but that performance I will absolutely never forget. So,
wow, it's like asking the first time you went to church and you meet Jesus after the service.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and Michael Brecker and Herbie Hancock were about as nice a human being as you could possibly imagine. They were super nice. Roy Hargrove, he was just sort of distant. He wasn't unpleasant. He just, I don't know. But Herbie and Michael were just super, super sweet, and really took time to talk to every single person that came by. So,
it's interesting. I've heard that about Roy, and I've also heard how wonderful Herbie is, and how everybody that meets him, he takes his time out. He's in a timelessness. He's very grounded. He's very humble, and I think that's the thing that I've always just loved about the jazz community. Like, the higher up the ladder you go, the cooler and the more grounded they are,
Oh, that's absolutely true. I spent 3-4 hours with Joe Lovano this past summer. I did an interview with him. I write for All About Jazz. And I did an interview with him. And talk about a super, super nice guy, That was, and that should be coming out soon, by the way. That's probably going to get split into a few pieces, but the first one should be out in the next few weeks. So that was a great interview.
One of the first time I ever interviewed Joe, and I knew about his lore, and when you go into a big cat like that, it's like you're not quite sure where it's going to go. And I remember he was in a cabin up in upstate New York, and he was kind of weathering out the pandemic, and his optimism and his realism and what he was doing and how he spoke. He was one of those people that every single thing that he said, every statement, every sentence, every paragraph was something that you could quote. And it was just nonstop. And he's just, he's up in that league of like a Sonny Rollins, where not only are they unbelievably talented and legendary, they have a way of weaving together an oratory that is so tasty that you're just like, you need to stop real quick so I can just gather myself. He speaks so eloquently. Like, everything the man says is exactly what you just said.
Exactly what you just said. He just has a way of conveying like his inner feelings that is very succinct and very aptly put. So I totally agree.
So talk to me a little bit about the Cleveland scene. What's it been like to be a part of that scene? I mean, I remember interviewing Ernie Creeped at one point, and that was wonderful. And it was one of my early baptisms into it. And he's legendary. He's like the cream of the crop. But talk to me about how you've evolved and how you've seen the Cleveland jazz scene go.
There's a real tight-knit community here. The talent is good. There's a lot of really great, talented musicians. I wish that there was more opportunities. There are good opportunities, and there's quite a few. But to put things in perspective, I started playing in a foreigner tribute band just so that I could generate more income. So, those type of things happen. And for me, I've always been a big pop fan. So playing pop music is a part of what I do. And even in any jazz playing I do, you're going to hear some pop elements. But that's to me is a little bit the Michael Brecker influence, I think, a little bit. But in any event, there are, as far as clubs, there's only a few, and there's a lot of people vying to play those places, if that makes sense to you. So the scene can be kind of difficult at times. I wish that there was more of an audience here in Northeast Ohio, and I think that's ultimately what drives it, because the average Ohioan isn't terribly hip to jazz, and certainly isn't really all that culturally involved. Now, that's not to say there aren't a lot of people that are. There certainly are, but that's not the norm. So it just makes for kind of a challenging situation, and it doesn't lead to as many opportunities as there are in other towns. So I'll just put it like that. But the talent is great, and we have a lot of universities, which I think is what the main driving force is behind having a lot of great players around. Like myself, I went to Kent State. We've got Akron University. My wife actually teaches at Cleveland State. She's not a musician. She's criminal justice, but they do have a very nice music program there. And there's a whole bunch of really nice universities around here. And every couple of years, you're going to get a couple more students, who are going out professionally into the world and fueling that talent pool. But I do kind of wish there were more opportunities.
The one thing about being a musician is there's so many aspects to it. There's the creating the music. There's the, live aspect. There's putting CDs out. What is it that you like the best about this process of being a professional musician?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry. You cut out there for a second.
What do you like the best about being a professional musician?
That's a good question. To me, I think it is the challenge, the reward and the challenge. To really create something and to devote your life to something. I look at other people sometimes and I don't understand a lot of people, because I look at them and they don't do anything. And I don't want to make anyone feel badly. That's not my point. That's not what I'm getting at. For me, it is like the core of who I am. Without it, I feel like I would be aimless. So I don't understand a lot of other people that don't have something like that fills that to them. And there are a lot of people out there that don't. I don't understand that. And maybe that's just my experience and, what it's been for me. But I don't know. To me, more than anything, it's just sort of the driving force who I am. And I think that's probably the best way I can describe it.
I can understand that. I can absolutely understand that. So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see any artist anywhere, where are you going?
Oh, boy. John Coltrane. I think that I would go back and see John Coltrane. Probably, preferably late 50s period.
Yeah.
If we fast forward a little bit too far, he might have gone off the deep end a little bit as far as my musical taste. I think John Coltrane, if I'm being selfish, I would see him with Miles Davis, because why not?
Yeah.
So,
if I took a poll, that would be the number one answer right there.
Yeah.
Coltrane specifically, but Miles and him together, yeah, that would be magnanimous. So, quite simply put, why do you love jazz?
So that's multifaceted. For one, just the sound of it. There's the actual timbre and sound just really appeals to me. And the groove and like the way it makes you feel. And as a performer, and that's really just the listening aspect of it, but as a performer, one, just the pure self-expression. It's probably the only thing I can think of where you are expressing right there in that moment. It's probably the only medium that I can think of that's like that. Well, dance, I suppose you could say the same thing. It's a performing art, but I don't know. There's something about it where it's almost instant gratification to be able to really like lay it all out there in front of the audience. And it just feels really good as a performer. Additionally, it's hard. It's challenging. And there's something fun about that. There's something fun about, oh shit, this tune it's got really challenging chord changes, or it's super fast. Like, I can't play that. But, I'm going to get, in the shed next couple weeks, I'm going to learn those changes and I'm going to play it. And in a couple weeks, it's going to sound really good. And then in a couple months, like I might be able to record on it, So to me, that's a challenge. And I like that. And challenges are fun. And it's something that, pushes you forward. So all of that. And then probably a bunch of other reasons I'm not thinking.
Well, let's see if we can get more reasons in this question here. Everyone has a perception or an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, boy. I've always seen myself as an artist, and I kind of put that beyond musician. There's a musician aspect of that, but I've always sort of thought myself as an artist and a creative. And that's sort of my self-identity. There's other aspects of it too. I do a lot of production work. I think in today's world, artists are not doing themselves justice if they're not putting out a lot of video content. I think that the two go hand in hand in today. I can perform here in Cleveland, and it looks like in January I'm performing in Miami. And I should have a New Orleans performance this summer. I've been doing that once a year. But no matter how many stops I go, no matter how many cities I go, all I can do is play in that one city. But I'm going off the deep end here. But if you create video of performance, anyone in the world can watch that at any point. As long as you have it on YouTube or Facebook or wherever. YouTube's the best medium. But so I think that artists today are not doing themselves justice if they're not doing that. So full circle back to the question. There's a lot of production work I'm doing now. It's sort of a key piece. So there's like a producer / entrepreneurial thing going on in there. But first and foremost, I just view myself as an artist and a creative. And there's other aspects. I'm also a husband. Relatively newly, we just got married in June. And I have a couple pets. I'm a pet dad, and to my mother, I'm a son. And to my brother, who lives in New Orleans, I'm a brother. But I don't know. To me, like that, I just, first and foremost, I've always seen myself simply as a creative. And
right on.
I'm happy when I'm creating. And when I'm not, I'm sort of directionless and don't know what to do with myself. So
yeah, for sure. That's a great answer, Matthew. Thank you for opening up today. Thanks for your time. Good luck with it.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Cleveland, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Matthew for his time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.